Path of Exile is a wildly addictive, dark fantasy action role-playing game created and continuously developed by Grinding Gear Games, a company originally conceived by 3 avid Diablo 2 fans within the confines of a humble garage. From this inception, it evolved into a lively alpha, a monumental closed beta, and a colossally smooth open beta. Eventually, the full game initially launched in 2013, marking the start of a continuous expansion release schedule. The release of PoE's gigantic Path of Exile 2 expansion, a substantial revamp and addition to the core game, draws closer and closer with every passing day. This video series delves into the entire history of PoE 1 leading up to PoE 2's release, inspecting every major update to the game. 3 down, plenty to go. Welcome to the PoE 1 Flashback Series. This episode analyzes PoE 1's official launch, known as patch 1.0.0 or 1.0. Path of Exile's closed and open betas went quite well, with a host of bugs squashed and content added between both of them. Leading up to the official launch of PoE, everything was progressing smoothly and steadily, especially for this independent company. The community was excited, the PoE forums were giddy, the game's subreddit was eager for the new update, and even some news outlets were so prepared for 1.0 to hit, they released articles about the launch before embargoes were to be lifted, wowing exiles across Rayclast with never-before-seen information, such as the addition of a new class and character. The developers were primed. During PoE's open beta alone, the development team expanded from 20 to 33 developers. Thanks to the community's support, the team was blowing up at a rapid rate, something that would continue with every major release. Initially, this workforce expansion was primarily to keep up even quicker content updates. With the launch of 1.0, Chris Wilson stated they sought to release updates every 2 weeks, which would include new skills, unique items, character balance, MTX, league modes, and more. While Grinding Gear Games would move away from this hyper-ambitious 2-week schedule eventually and consolidate updates into each new league launch and expansion, they kept going forward with it for quite a while. We'll all see in this series when they made the switch. Nonetheless, their historic content schedule was going well, and after 7 months of an open beta, Grinding Gear Games released Path of Exile officially on October 23rd, 2013, with an avalanche of major content pieces and features. One of the pillars of 1.0 was the conclusion of PoE's third act and the arrival of High Templar Dominus' boss fight. Although not as substantial as the introduction of Act 3 and Piety at the start of the open beta, exiles were prepared to finally down the vile thaumaturge who banished them to Rayclast to begin the campaign. After slaying Piety, exiles picked up a tower key. This led them to a massive tower called the Scepter of God, inhabited by High Templar Dominus, his servants, and his creations. Spoilers for the Path of Exile 1 campaign here. Be warned, fellow exiles. Upon reaching the pinnacle, we finally discovered Dominus had been sending people from his homeland, Oriath, and its capital city of Theopolis to collect lost knowledge about the fallen Eternal Empire, their pursuit of power through virtue gems, and the vast strength and dark magic buried away across Rayclast. To that end, he also forced criminals to Rayclast so they could be used and experimented on by his Blackguard and Thaumaturge legions, including Piety of Theopolis. Those criminals became many of the exiles our characters knew, and, of course, our characters themselves. Just before confronting Dominus at the pinnacle of the Scepter of God, players were finally able to unlock the Scion, saving her from the High Templar's machinations. Once someone interacted with her in the tower, or in a subsequent patch, defeated Dominus, the 7th PoE class was unlocked on their account forevermore. At the top of the Scepter of God awaited the ultimate showdown of Act 3. Us, an exile, versus our exiler, his experiments, and his minions. Dominus High Templar was merely the first phase of the fight though. Upon defeating the man's mortal form, he transformed into a nightmarish abomination, claiming ascension and becoming Dominus Ascendant. The blood rain spewed forth during this phase of the fight slaughtered many in exile and brought a satisfying conclusion to the story of initial exiling to Rayclast. Of course, we cannot forget the iconic lines also added to the game with High Templar Dominus. Both the touch of God and this world is an illusion. Exile are burned into the minds of many of us, original 1.0 players and PoE novices alike. Alongside the arrival of Dominus was the addition of the Domination Softcore League. Domination League summoned shrines across Rayclast, adding one of the ARPG fundamental fluff systems to Path of Exile. These shrines were dotted across every area of the game and guarded by monster packs. These monster packs were enhanced by the shrine's particular effect, which could be obtained by the character if the character interacted with the shrine. Simple, yeah? Chris Wilson tried to sell this as a whole risk-reward scenario. Will you risk your character, charge into the pack, and click the shrine for the buff? For many, the monsters weren't a huge threat, especially if they weren't in hardcore, which No one would be, because this league was a softcore league. As a result, these shrines ended up buffing each and every character in campaign and map areas. In total, 16 different shrines were added to the game initially. In future patches, more shrines would be introduced via unique items, map modifying items, and even special map areas in the late PoE endgame. Shrines were split into two categories: buff and spell. Buff shrines granted characters a buff to monsters, players, or nearby party members. Spell shrines cast spells around themselves or affected characters, but were unaffected by any modifiers on those characters. Of the 16 shrines in Domination, the 3 most inspiring were, hold on, this is a chronicle of PoE. We're not only doing 3. We're doing all 16. The Acceleration Shrine increased action speed by 50% and projectile speed by 80%. The Brutal Shrine increased damage by 50%, stun duration by 30%, and caused those affected to knock back enemies on hit. Plus, it gave characters the extra gore effect when killing monsters. The Diamond Shrine caused all hits to be critical strikes. The Divine Shrine prevented you from being damaged. The Echoing Shrine granted 100% more attack speed, 100% more cast speed, and the effect skills repeat an additional time. The Impenetrable Shrine gave 100% increased armor, 100% increased evasion rating, and 100% increased maximum energy shield. The Lightning Shrine caused a constant shock nova and created shocking ground. The Massive Shrine gave 30% increased character size, 40% increased area of effect, and 40% increased maximum life. The Replenishing Shrine granted 10% of mana regenerated per second and 6.7% of life regenerated per second. The Resistance Shrine gave plus 50% to all elemental resistances and plus 10% to all maximum resistances. The Shrouded Shrine created smoke clouds around your character. The Skeletal Shrine casted summon skeletons upon killing enemies. The Burning Shrine rained fire down around your character. The Hexing Shrine caused your hits to inflict random curses. The Shock Shrine spewed lightning arcs from your character, and the Thorn Shrine caused your character to reflect some physical and elemental damage. The most shrine-connected unique item brought in Domination was the Gull, a raven mask that strengthened shrine buffs on your character. The helmet made them last longer and have an increased effect. Flashing forward to expansion 2.6.0, the Gull gained the ability to spawn a lesser shrine from a set of 6 when an enemy was killed. These lesser shrines included lesser massive, brutal, and acceleration shrines. This was a commonality in Path of Exile. An item was introduced initially, given a cool effect, and then that effect would be expanded upon in later leagues. Of course, sometimes an item so unbelievably awesome would enter the game and remain relatively unchanged its entire life, as we'll see in a moment. After Domination League ended, shrines would be added to the game, with some shrines being removed from the possible set of spawnable entities, including the Thorn, Hexing, and Burning shrines. In subsequent updates, new shrines would make their way into the game, and the mechanic as a whole would be a welcome buff to the mapping experience in the Atlas passive skill tree. Of course, we'll touch on that later. I don't want to frighten any newcomers to the series with that level of limitless possibility just yet. The progenitor to one of the most controversial and widely hated leagues in the history of the Path of Exile subreddit and general player base, Nemesis League was 1.0.0's hardcore league and granted rare monsters a new, powerful set of monster modifiers. Each rare monster would spawn with at least one modifier from the Nemesis pool, which was full of brand new character-monster interactions and challenges unique to Path of Exile. Now, let's go over every single Nemesis modifier added into... I gotcha. We're not going to do that. Let's just look at the most infamous modifiers in the group, plus a few that flew under the radar, perhaps. Volatile Flameblood caused an explosive meteor to appear on a monster's death. It would chase characters down, persisting through area transitions even. Sometimes, this could be a hardcore character-killing surprise. Soul Eater imbued rare monsters with the ability to consume dying creatures around itself, enlarging it, buffing its damage, attack, and cast speed, and granting damage reduction. To this day, it's a frightening sight in almost every form of content. Final Grasp left behind an invincible copy of a dead rare monster that disappeared after a few seconds. The copy also fired a nova of dark projectiles periodically. Pretty scary. Inner Treasure ensured the rare monster would always drop a unique item on death, a distant precursor to the brief Arch Nemesis tied loot drop modifiers. Oh, don't worry, we'll get there eventually. On top of the new modifiers for rare monsters, Nemesis League contained a single league exclusive drop, a unique item that would forever be etched into the fabric of Path of Exile history: Headhunter. This uber rare unique belt held a modifier that allowed characters to steal the modifiers of rare monsters killed for a set amount of time. Unprecedented in might, this belt allowed characters to reach power levels unseen and unheard of before in Path of Exile. It's the source of many iconic clips that showcase PoE as a game where anything can happen and how endgame itself can become a single, huge character model consuming the entire screen thanks to the array of stolen rare monster modifiers. Headhunter still stands high above most uniques, alongside an array of other highly treasured unique chase items. Some might argue Headhunter is the first true chase item in Path of Exile, an object sought after by countless players that enables and empowers a myriad of character builds. While it was contained to a drop pool only accessible from monsters and maps with Nemesis modifiers for an extended period of time, eventually it was added to the core drop pool of PoE, meaning it could then drop absolutely anywhere. Likely rising above the addition of Act 3's ultimate area in terms of player value was the debut of an advanced class, the Scion, Path of Exile 1's 7th and final playable character class. The daughter of corrupt nobles, the Scion was exiled to Ray class for killing her husband on her wedding night. She was aligned with all 3 core attributes: strength, dexterity, and intelligence, which placed her directly in the center of the massive passive skill tree. This unique position allowed her to develop into almost any type of character build, while she lacked the dedicated specialization that PoE's 6 existing classes offered. Because of her supremely high learning curve, she was initially unavailable to new players. They had to play through Path of Exile's normal difficulty in any league to unlock her as an accessible character permanently. Her starting skill was Spectral Throw, a new skill gem in 1.0. Immediately, players began divulging exactly how they could create a stellar build using this new class. She featured prominently in almost all the promotional material for the game's launch and even starred in the premiere build of the week for 1.0, an awesome idea we'll touch on shortly. Her addition marked the end of brand new classes in PoE 1, but an upcoming expansion would add a whole new level to class customization, giving players a host of archetypal options to expand their characters and powerful builds with forevermore. Even though Grinding Gear Games' relationship with its community was beginning to be tested with a huge influx of new players and PoE's official launch, they kept communication and community highlights as one of the most important values to them. Grinding Gear Games was not a faceless executive firm. Instead, it was a company of passionate individuals building a game from the ground up, with one very visible face among them: Chris Wilson, one of the 3 founders of the studio. In addition to constantly posting on the forums, adding context to lightly detailed patch notes, and frequenting PoE's subreddit, he narrated the successful, but not appropriately named, Path of Exile Build of the Week series, alongside numerous other PoE videos. Most of the time, this YouTube series would highlight awesome, community-created builds in Path of Exile. They noted interesting interactions, powerhouse mappers, and stellar bossers alike, although sometimes, especially in the present day era of builds of the week, the builds weren't attainable by the typical PoE player. Regardless of its consistency, or what eventually happened to each of the builds covered, this was a great move by Grinding Gear Games to not only foster their relationship with the community, but to prop up budding content creators in the scene. After all, the biggest part of Path of Exile was and is crafting a cool character. The folks who achieve this and share their content online are the real heroes of the creator community. I respect almost each and every one of them, except the folks who sneakily update their build guide, forum post, or YouTube titles in new leagues, even though their build has been changed drastically by balance and other game updates. Absolutely blasphemous. From here on out in the PoE Flashback Series, we'll likely be examining at least one famous or infamous build from every expansion to Path of Exile. What might be the 1.1.0 build? Well, those of you who were there, state your totally not unhinged opinion in the comments, please. Of course, the developers also sought to nurture a thriving community, not only to help grow the reach of their game, but fund its further development. PoE's launch blasted another group of supporter packs into the annals of PoE history and removed the ability to purchase the open beta packs. Serious FOMO. Briefly, this set of launch supporter packs contained exclusive back pieces, portals, and character frames, split into levels based on pack. Higher tier packs included an Exalted Orb t-shirt and hoodie. The lowest cost pack was $50, a departure from the previous low range, and the highest cost pack was $900. Unshockingly, these were successful. The optional MTX for a free-to-play game continued to thrive with Path of Exile. 1.0 also inserted guilds into the game, a nice addition into an already quite social experience. Global chat was almost always active post-launch, but guilds and guild chats allowed closer-knit communities to bud and flourish. To create one, players used the social screen. Guilds could initially hold 30 members, but more slots could be purchased from the MTX store. There were 3 membership tiers: Leader, officer, and member. Leaders could change permissions, officers could invite people to the guild. There was a guild chat channel bound to the and symbol. It spanned across leagues. Dedicated guilds could obtain tags that appeared next to their members' names in chat. This required sacrificing a set of endgame maps, each of which corresponded to a letter or symbol in the tag. Tags were unique, and some symbols were much rarer than others. Guilds aren't a staple to the PoE experience, but they were definitely a cool addition to the game. Exiles out there today, are you in an active guild? Or are you more attached to a specific global chat channel, as I am? Throughout PoE's betas and early post-launch days, races were legendary, from the rewards to the dedicated viewers and discussions attached to each. Racers and races were ranked by points. These points were earned from a variety of things, mainly experience gained, reaching certain levels, and being the first character to complete a certain objective. Before the official launch, Kripparrian won Race Season 1, and, as a result, most likely the most valuable item in Path of Exile history, a rank 1 placement Demigod's Triumph. It's unlikely he'd ever trade for it for any sum of money or currency out there. It'll rise gloriously in his stash forever. 3 more races ran during the betas, but none were as prestigious. The first race of 100 was Race Season 5, with a signature 120-minute solo race and a new race type called Descent Champions. Characters descended through 15 levels of a custom dungeon, killing monsters, bosses, and earning points along the way. Unlike past races, Descent Champions included map modifiers in its areas, optional passive skill points, and new bosses. It was a hardcore race, but dead characters with enough points could still earn prizes. These prizes included custom art unique items, and, for the top 20 players, an alternate art Demigod's Touch. Another season, Race Season 6, ran from January 11th, 2014 to February 23rd, 2014, and awarded players with another set of awesome custom art unique items. Wow, how I wish I was around back then. In the initial patch for 100, a few other updates arrived alongside the big ticket items. Xandro Blooddrinker, a new rogue exile based on a member of the PoE community who won the well-dressed exile competition, began running across the shores of Rayclast. New gems like Spectral Throw, Anime Guardian and Weapon, Cast on Crit, and Cast when damage taken also made it into the game. Forevermore, the latter two would be used in build after build to accomplish multiple feats. PoE also gained an achievement system. They didn't reward anything substantial, but were a nice to have in an online game. Of course, the developers also added the Gold, Diamond, Exalted, Eternal, and Ruler of Rayclast supporters to the game's credits. Magic and rare monsters finally had new effects to differentiate them from regular monsters, a welcome addition for many. Dozens of items were rebalanced, including unique items and skill gems. Monsters also saw some adjustments, such as the item drops of act bosses becoming substantially better. One of the best bug fixes hit the game too, disallowing us exiles from using an Orb of Fusing on a fully linked item or a Jeweler's Orb on a fully socketed item. Rest in peace to all the lost 6 links and sockets from that little gem. On October 28th in 1.0.0D, the developers finally fixed auras resetting with every area change, so you no longer needed to recast them every time you changed from one map to the next. The next version change, 1.0.1 on November 13th, 2013, brought a variety of new gems into the game, including a new exceptional support gem, Enhanced Support. Once again, new art was added for Frenzy, Endurance, and Power Charges. In 1.0.1c on November 21st, 2013, the Escape menu gained the Exit to Character Selection option, a cool add. 1.0.2 came in on November 29th, 2013, with substantial endgame map balance, adding a group of new modifiers and removing the previously discussed labyrinthine and massive modifiers from the map pool. As a baseline, all maps were larger now. Additionally, this patch completely rebalanced all damage over time calculations. It was a complicated revamp. 1.0.3 on December 10th, 2013 gave ranged characters 2 new gems, Barrage and Vicious Projectile support. In addition, lots of sounds were revamped, including every slashing impact sound effect in the game. 1.0.4 kept pushing PvP in PoE, adding the ability to challenge other exiles to a duel into the game. It never really caught on. A huge quality of life feature arrived too. Resistances on the character screen now showed your uncapped total in brackets. Your resistances also appeared in red if you had less than 0%. Plus, to prevent spam, the developers added the requirement for characters to be level 2 or higher before they could use global or trade chat. Of course, this could be bypassed if players had previously had a character of level 25 or higher on their account beforehand. No letter patches followed 1.0.4. Instead, 1.0.5 dropped on January 9th, 2014 with the addition of Enlightened support, another exceptional support gem, but it didn't do what it does now. Instead, it helped increase the experience of gems it was leveling, allowing characters to quickly level skill gems. 1.0.6 was ushered in on January 29, 2014, and inserted Summon Raging Spirit and a few other corpse-related skills into PoE, like Desecrate and Flesh Offering. Minion behavior was also changed this patch without being noted, only to be quickly fixed in a subsequent letter patch. You could also now add notes to people on your friends list, a feature I use quite often today. In almost every single one of the non-letter patches, the developers placed between 1 and 5 unique items into the game, steadily growing the pool. Many of them were designed by Diamond tier closed beta supporters. One of the added unique items not designed by a supporter was Alberon's Warpath. In its first iteration, it merely added plus 9 to 12% chaos resistance, 20% increased movement speed, and plus 2 to the maximum number of summoned skeletons. This is an example of a legacy item tremendously buffed in a distant expansion. In 3.19, Alberon's Warpath became an amazing item. We'll get there soon. When Path of Exile launched alongside the Domination and Nemesis Leagues on October 23, 2013, it's unlikely many folks knew how successful it would be. 1.0.0 was merely the official start of an ambitious 3 to 4 month update cycle that would bring dozens of expansions to Path of Exile over the next decade and beyond. Already in this new phase of the game, Grinding Gear Games and its community were learning together, coalescing to form a formidable force in the ARPG industry, one that, by word of mouth, could cause titans to stumble or shy away in fear. Up next, 1.1.0 would bring 2 new leagues, Ambush and Invasion, plus Path of Exile's first endgame boss, a well-armed queen. But that's for the next video in the PoE 1 Flashback Series. I'll see you there. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and hit the bell for more Path of Exile content. Give it a like and share your totally not unhinged opinion in the comments. I'd love to see your version of the vision. For those of you who'd like to join the ranks of us totally sane exiles and directly support the growth of this channel, consider becoming a patron on Patreon or a member here on YouTube. Massive shout out to the channel's current members and patrons. Thank you for your support. Tala Moana.